After weeks away, a father returns determined to surprise his daughter, a mute 7-year-old child. But instead of smiles, he finds silence, fear, and the echo of screams coming from a forgotten warehouse. There he witnesses the scene that changes everything. His daughter, forced to eat rotten food under her stepmother's insults. The Albright estate, nestled high on one of Aspen Ridge's most exclusive hills in the Colorado mountains, seemed to slumber under the thin mist of that autumn afternoon. The imperial palms lining the main entrance swayed gently, as if waving a welcome to the black car ascending the winding road towards the ornate gates. Inside the vehicle, Gustav Albright adjusted his tie and observed the property he hadn't seen in almost 2 months. The enormous windows reflected the setting sun, giving the house an old gold appearance. It was an imposing place, but one that always felt more like a postcard than a true home to him. "We've arrived, sir," the driver announced, stopping at the entrance. Gustav took a deep breath. Although the long business trip to the Pacific Northwest had been a success, expanding his construction companies into new markets, returning to the estate brought a mix of anxiety and expectation. It wasn't the million-dollar venture that stirred him, but the encounter with someone far more important. "Sophia," he murmured, clutching a small gift box he had bought in Seattle. His 7-year-old daughter, who hadn't uttered a single word since the tragic event that took her mother, Cecilia, 3 years ago. The gates opened automatically, and the driver circled the central garden fountain, stopping before the marble staircase. Gustav alighted and waved away help with his luggage. "It's fine, Paul, I'll take them myself. Enjoy your weekend." The driver nodded and departed, leaving Gustav alone before the house. Normally the housekeeper, Mrs. Chloe, would already be at the door to greet him, and Sophia, despite her condition, always ran to the window upon hearing the car. But that day a strange silence hung over the property. Gustav ascended the steps and opened the door, carrying his suitcase and the gift. The entrance hall was deserted, and not even the sound of staff footsteps was audible. "Anyone home?" he called, setting his luggage on the floor. The echo of his voice bounced off the walls adorned with expensive paintings and antique furniture. No answer. He checked his watch, 5:45 p.m. It was the time Sophia usually had her snack in the dining room. "Vanessa," he called again, this time using the name of the wife he had married just over a year ago. Vanessa Montgomery Albright, 28, a former model, now a fashion entrepreneur. When he met her, she seemed a light amidst the grief that consumed him. Charming, intelligent, and apparently affectionate with Sophia. Friends had applauded his decision to rebuild his life, and even his always critical mother had approved the union. Gustav crossed the hall towards the dining room. Empty, the kitchen too. A shiver ran down his spine when he heard a muffled sound coming from the back of the property. It was something like a groan or a suppressed cry. He crossed the corridor leading to the back area, where the service quarters and an old shed used to store furniture and disused items were located. The sound grew louder, now clearly identifiable as screams. Screams that chilled his blood. He quickened his pace, almost running, when he heard a sharp female voice. "Swallow it! Come on, you ungrateful child. This will teach you never to touch my things again." Gustav kicked open the shed door. The scene he found paralyzed him. Sophia, his little Sophia, was sitting on the concrete floor, dirty with tear marks on her flushed face, before a bowl of something that smelled like spoiled food. Standing, holding her by the hair, was Vanessa. "What is going on here?" Gustav asked, his voice barely audible. Vanessa released Sophia immediately. Her face transformed with startling speed, as if someone had swapped a mask of fury for one of fragility and surprise. "Darling, you're home early. I was just trying to teach her discipline. You know how difficult she's been lately." Sophia, trembling, ran behind a pile of old boxes, her large eyes fixed on her father, pleading in a silence that screamed, "Discipline?" Forcing her to eat this? Gustav pointed to the bowl, where he identified clearly deteriorated food scraps. The smell was nauseating. "It's not what it looks like." Vanessa adjusted her perfect hair and placed her hands over her stomach in a calculated gesture. "My nerves are on edge because of the pregnancy. You know how much we've been waiting for this baby. I thought Sophia needed to learn to be more careful. She broke one of my French trinkets this morning." The mention of the pregnancy, announced by phone 2 weeks prior, should have brought joy. But at that moment, with his daughter hidden and trembling with fear, the news seemed just another piece in a disturbing puzzle. "Sophia? Come here," Gustav called, extending his hand. The girl hesitated, casting a frightened glance at Vanessa, before running to her father. When he picked her up, Gustav realized how light she was, almost too fragile for a 7-year-old. "Let's go inside. We need to talk," he said, addressing Vanessa but keeping his eyes on Sophia. Vanessa smiled, but her eyes remained cold. "Of course, darling. I prepared a special dinner to celebrate your return. Chloe resigned last week, what a shame. But I hired a new girl, Julia, who is doing well." Gustav merely nodded, carrying Sophia out of the shed. He felt his daughter's small body tremble against his chest, and a knot formed in his throat. What else had happened during his absence? How had he not noticed anything before? The house, which no longer felt like a home, now revealed itself as the setting for something far darker than he could imagine. Upon entering, he saw a young woman of about 20, her hair tied in a simple bun, standing hesitantly in the hallway. Her eyes met Gustav's for a second and quickly darted to Sophia, with an expression that mixed compassion and fear. "Mr. Albright, welcome," she said in a low voice. "I'm Julia, the new maid." "Thank you." "Julia," he replied mechanically. "Dinner will be served in half an hour," Vanessa informed, her tone perfectly modulated, as if the scene in the shed had never happened. "Why don't you take Sophia to get ready?" She was playing in the garden and got all dirty. The lie flowed naturally from Vanessa's lips, which now caressed Gustav's arm with fingers that, hours earlier, had violently pulled his daughter's hair. "I'll take her," Julia said, approaching. "If you allow, sir." Sophia clung tighter to her father, and Gustav felt a pang in his chest. "It's okay, princess," he murmured. "Daddy's home now and everything will be fine." Still reluctant, Sophia got down from her father's arms and took Julia's outstretched hand. Before moving away, she cast a glance at Vanessa. Not of fear, Gustav realized, but of a comprehension far beyond her 7 years. It was the look of someone who knew her adversary. "Vanessa, can we talk in the study?" Gustav asked as soon as Sophia and Julia had left. "Of course, darling," she replied, smiling. "But first, don't you want to see what I bought for the baby's room? The pieces arrived from New York City yesterday." Gustav felt anger rise within him, but he suppressed it. He needed to understand what was happening before making any decisions. "Later. Now we need to talk about what I just witnessed." Vanessa's smile wavered for an instant. It was just a moment of impatience. "You know how difficult children can be, and with pregnancy hormones." "There was no need to lock my daughter in a shed and force her to eat spoiled food," Gustav interrupted, his voice low but laden with indignation. "You're exaggerating." Vanessa adjusted her hair again. A tic Gustav was beginning to notice emerged when she felt challenged. "It was just a lesson. And it wasn't spoiled, just cold." The nauseating smell was still vivid in Gustav's memory, contradicting the assertion. But he decided not to press the point at that moment. He needed to think clearly. "I'm going to take a shower before dinner," he said, turning away. "Don't forget we have the Foundation's charity event on Saturday," Vanessa reminded him, regaining her composure. "All of Aspen Ridge's top business elite will be there." Gustav merely nodded and headed to his room. On the way, he passed Sophia's room. The door was ajar, and he could see Julia gently helping the girl change her clothes. Sophia kept her gaze down, her small figure still trembling. "It's all right now," Julia murmured. "Your father is home." Upon hearing these words, Sophia looked up and met her father's gaze through the crack in the door. For a brief moment, a flicker of hope appeared in the depths of those dark eyes, a silent plea that Gustav swore to himself he would not ignore. Something was deeply wrong in that house, and he needed to find out what it was before it was too late. Dinner proceeded in a sepulchral silence. At the enormous oak table, there were only 3 people, Gustav at the head, Vanessa to his right, and Sophia to his left. The girl kept her eyes fixed on her plate, stirring her food without bringing it to her mouth. From time to time, she cast furtive glances at Vanessa, like a small cornered animal in constant vigilance. Julia served the meal with restrained movements, avoiding any unnecessary noise. When she approached to serve water to Sophia, Gustav noticed a quick exchange of glances between the maid and his daughter, a silent complicity that intrigued him. "How were the business dealings in Seattle?" Vanessa asked, cutting a piece of meat with surgical precision. Her face was impeccably made up, and she wore a navy blue dress that enhanced her natural elegance. "Productive," Gustav replied dryly. "We secured the bid for the new commercial complex." "Wonderful," Vanessa exclaimed, her enthusiasm sounding artificial. "We should celebrate. Perhaps dinner with the Maxwells next weekend?" "I won't be traveling for a while," Gustav declared, carefully observing his wife's reaction. "I need to spend more time at home. With Sophia." An almost imperceptible tremor passed over Vanessa's perfectly outlined lips. "Of course, darling. The little one misses you very much," she said, reaching out to touch Sophia's arm. The girl recoiled instinctively, almost knocking over her glass of water. The liquid swayed but did not spill. "Sorry," Vanessa whispered, but her eyes gleamed with momentary irritation. "She's been so nervous lately. Maybe we need to schedule another appointment with Dr. Raymond." "What doctor?" Gustav asked, frowning. "The child psychologist I mentioned on the phone. Sophia has been exhibiting some concerning behaviors at school. He suggested we might need more intensive treatment." Gustav observed his daughter, who now seemed even smaller in her chair, as if she wanted to disappear. "What kind of behaviors?" he questioned. Vanessa sighed dramatically. She refuses to participate in activities, isolates herself from classmates. The teacher found disturbing drawings in her notebook, dark figures, scenes of confinement. The doctor believes it might be a more serious disorder than we imagined. Julia, collecting a plate, let out a muffled sound as if suppressing a response. Vanessa shot her a sharp glance. "Is there a problem, Julia?" "No, madam." "Pardon me," the young woman replied, lowering her eyes. Dinner continued in a heavy atmosphere. Gustav observed every interaction, every exchanged glance, mentally cataloguing details that would have previously gone unnoticed. When Sophia was finally excused, he noticed his daughter's delicate shoulders visibly relax as she moved away from the table. "I'll put her to bed," Gustav announced, rising. "No need, darling." Vanessa stopped him with a calculated smile. "Julia can do that while we discuss the foundation. We have important decisions to make before the event." Gustav hesitated, torn between the desire to be with his daughter and the need to better understand what happened in that house when he was absent. "All right," he finally agreed. "But first I want to say good night to her." In Sophia's room, decorated in shades of lilac and white, the girl was already sitting on the bed, hugging the only object left from her biological mother, a time-worn plush rabbit with a slightly frayed ear. Julia adjusted the pillows with gentle gestures. "Could you leave us for a moment?" Gustav asked the maid. Julia nodded and left, not without casting a significant glance at Sophia, as if conveying a silent message of courage. Gustav sat on the edge of the bed and took the small box he had brought from Seattle from his pocket. "I brought something special for you, Princess." The girl's eyes lit up as she opened the present and found a delicate silver necklace with a bird-shaped pendant. "It's an American robin," Gustav explained. "They say it's the bird that sings the most beautiful melodies, even when it's far from home." Sophia touched the pendant with reverence and, in a rare impulse, hugged her father tightly. Gustav's heart ached as he realized how much his daughter had lost weight. How had he not noticed before? "Sophia," he whispered, pulling back to look into her eyes. "Is everything okay here at home when Daddy travels?" The girl looked away, suddenly tense. "You can tell me anything. I promise I'll protect you." Sophia bit her lip, her eyes filling with tears. Slowly, she took her father's hand and guided it under the mattress, from where she retrieved a folded paper. It was a drawing, a small figure inside what appeared to be a dark square, surrounded by lines suggesting bars or a closed door. Gustav felt a knot in his throat. "Is that you?" he asked gently. The girl confirmed with an almost imperceptible nod of her head. "And this place, is it the shed?" Another affirmative nod. "Did this happen more often?" "Before today." Sophia's eyes, large and expressive, said everything her voice could not. Gustav hugged his daughter again, this time letting a tear escape. "Forgive me for not being here," he murmured against the girl's hair. "This won't happen again, I promise." When he returned to the living room, he found Vanessa on the phone speaking in a low voice. Seeing him, she quickly ended the call. "Sophia asleep already?" she asked with superficial interest. "Almost," Gustav replied, studying her. How had he not noticed the coldness behind that smile before? Who were you talking to? To Martha from the foundation. About the event preparations, Vanessa answered without hesitation. Come, let's review the guest list. For the next hour, Gustav feigned interest in the discussions about the charity event while his mind worked in another direction. When they finally retired to their room, he claimed fatigue from the trip and said he needed to check some work emails. Don't be long, Vanessa asked, sliding under the Egyptian silk sheets. I missed you. Gustav merely nodded and left the room. Instead of going to the study, he silently headed to the kitchen, where he found Julia organizing the dinner dishes. I need to talk to you, he said, keeping his voice low. The young woman looked around nervously. Not here, sir. She has cameras. The revelation hit Gustav like a punch. Cameras where? In the living room, the main hallway, and here in the kitchen, Julia replied, pretending to continue her work. She checks the recordings when you're not here. How do you know that? Mrs. Vanessa showed me when I was hired. She said it was to ensure I did everything correctly. Julia stopped what she was doing and looked directly at Gustav for the first time. Sir, there's something you need to know, but I can't talk here. Meet me tomorrow in the garden near the greenhouse. It's the only place without surveillance. Before Gustav could answer, he heard approaching footsteps. Vanessa appeared at the kitchen entrance wearing a silk robe. Oh, you're both here, she said, her tone slightly accusatory. Any problem? Just asking for some tea to help me sleep, Gustav replied promptly. The trip was tiring. I'll make it for you myself, darling, Vanessa offered, moving to the stove. Julia, aren't you done here? You may leave. The maid nodded, casting a last glance at Gustav before leaving. The look clearly said, be careful. The next morning, Gustav woke early. Vanessa was still asleep, her face serene in contrast to the previous day's tension. He dressed silently and left the room. His first destination was Sophia's room. The girl was also already awake, sitting on the bed drawing. Good morning, princess, he whispered. What are you drawing? Sophia turned the paper so he could see. It was a figure that appeared to be Vanessa, with long red strokes coming from her mouth like fire or screams. Below, a small green object which Gustav recognized as a lettuce leaf. Is it because of yesterday? In the shed? The girl nodded yes, and then turned the page of her notebook, revealing another drawing. In this one, there was a small figure holding something in her hand, something green and withered. You saved a leaf of that food? Gustav asked, perplexed. Sophia got out of bed and went to the small chest where she kept her toys. From a secret compartment at the bottom, she pulled out a folded handkerchief. Opening it, she revealed a completely rotten lettuce leaf, now almost black. Gustav felt his stomach churn. It wasn't just cold food, as Vanessa had claimed. It was decomposing food. Why did you keep this, Sophia? The girl pointed to her father and then made a gesture as if writing. To show me? To prove it? She nodded vigorously. At that moment, Gustav understood the extent of the cruelty his daughter had faced, and how she, even without words, had found a way to document her suffering, patiently waiting for someone to believe her. I'll take care of this, he promised, carefully putting the evidence in his pocket. Now let's have breakfast. On the way to the dining room, they passed the corridor where the family portraits hung. Gustav stopped before the photograph of Cecilia, his first wife. The genuine smile, the gentle eyes, so different from Vanessa's calculated smiles. I'm sorry, he murmured to the image, as if she could hear. I'm going to fix this. Sophia held his hand tighter, and together they went to breakfast, where Vanessa was already waiting, impeccable in her designer casual dress, as if nothing in the world could disturb her artificial perfection. Good morning, family, she greeted with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. We have a busy day ahead. Breakfast was served by Julia under Vanessa's watchful eye. Sophia slowly ate her oatmeal, while Gustav observed the dynamic between the three. The maid seemed uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with her employer whenever possible. I have a meeting with suppliers in New York City next week, Vanessa commented, buttering a piece of toast. I'll need to be away for 3 days. I thought you'd avoid travel because of the pregnancy, Gustav commented, studying her carefully. Vanessa caressed her still flat belly. The doctor said it's fine in the first trimester. Besides, it's only a 3-hour drive. Gustav nodded, filing away the information. Sophia and I will be fine. In fact, I'm thinking of taking her for an outing today. It's been a long time since we spent a day together. A flicker of irritation crossed Vanessa's face, quickly replaced by a forced smile. What a wonderful idea. But remember, we have that lunch with the foundation sponsors at 1 p.m. You can go alone, Gustav suggested, calmly. Explain that I just got back from a trip and want to spend time with my daughter. Your presence is important, Gustav. They're your business contacts too. Sophia is more important, he stated, holding his daughter's hand across the table. The girl looked at her father with an expression of surprise and hope. Vanessa placed her napkin beside her plate with careful deliberation. Of course she is. But perhaps it's not good to expose her to too much excitement right now. As I said, she's been nervous and Dr. Raymond recommended routine and tranquility. This Dr. Raymond, Gustav hesitated, aware he needed to tread carefully. Do you have his contact information? I'd like to schedule an appointment to talk to him personally about Sophia. Certainly, Vanessa replied, her eyes calculating something. It's in my planner. I can call him today. After breakfast, Gustav announced he would take Sophia for a walk in the garden. Vanessa didn't hide her displeasure, but limited herself to reminding him of the afternoon commitment. The mansion's garden was extensive, with perfectly manicured lawns and tropical flower beds that sloped down in terraces to a small Victorian greenhouse, a relic of a former English owner who had lived there in the early 20th century. It was a rarely frequented spot, hidden by a small grove of native trees, away from the main house's view. Gustav held Sophia's hand as they walked through the garden, pointing out birds and flowers, trying to create a moment of normalcy amidst the whirlwind of worries consuming him. The girl seemed more relaxed outdoors, away from Vanessa's eyes. As they approached the greenhouse, Gustav spotted Julia, who was pretending to tend to some plants. She waved discreetly, indicating it was safe to talk. Sophia, how about looking for some colorful pebbles for your collection? Gustav suggested, pointing to the small pebble path. Stay where I can see you, okay? The girl nodded, understanding her father's intention, and moved a few feet away, crouching to examine the stones on the path. What do you need to tell me? Gustav asked in a low voice, approaching Julia. The young woman looked around nervously before replying. I've only been here 2 weeks, sir, but I've already seen things that terrified me. Mrs. Vanessa, she's not who she appears to be. What exactly did you see? Sophia is regularly locked in the shed. It's happened at least 4 times since I arrived. Always for insignificant reasons. Knocking something over, taking too long to finish homework, or simply when Mrs. Vanessa is in a bad mood. Julia wrung her hands. And that's not all. The food. She sometimes saves leftovers for days and forces Sophia to eat them when she's disobedient. Gustav felt his blood boil. Why didn't you report this? Why didn't you call me? I tried, sir, Julia replied, her eyes welling up. The first time I mentioned it to the previous housekeeper, Mrs. Chloe, the next day she was fired. Her accused of theft. Mrs. Vanessa showed me the cameras and said she knew every movement in the house. Then she hesitated. Please continue. Then I found your office number and called. The secretary said she would pass on the message, but I don't think it ever reached you. 2 days later, Mrs. Vanessa casually mentioned how efficient your secretary was at filtering unwanted calls. Gustav closed his eyes for a moment, processing the information. Renata, his secretary, was Vanessa's recommendation. Is there anything else I should know? Julia lowered her voice even further. The pregnancy. I have my doubts. Once I found birth control pills in her bathroom, and I've never seen her with morning sickness or any other symptoms. That's a serious accusation, Gustav pondered. I know, sir. I wouldn't say it if I wasn't sure of what I saw. And there's one more thing. Julia hesitated again. What? She receives visitors when you're not home, a man. I overheard them talking about the plan and about ensuring total control. Sophia approached at that moment, holding some colorful stones in her small hands. Her gaze was inquisitive. They're very beautiful, Gustav commented, forcing a smile. To Julia, he murmured, We'll continue this conversation later. In the meantime, keep an eye on Sophia when I'm not around. The young woman nodded, moving away to continue her work with the plants. Gustav picked up his daughter and began the walk back to the house, his mind buzzing with the new information. Back at the estate, Vanessa awaited them on the veranda. her face a mask of studied serenity. "I'm going to get ready for lunch," she announced. "Gustav, we need to leave in 40 minutes. "I already said I'm not going," he replied calmly. "I'll stay with Sophia today." The mask slipped for a moment, revealing irritation, but Vanessa quickly recovered. "As you wish. But we need to talk when I get back." When Vanessa left, Gustav took Sophia to his study, a cozy room with walls lined with books and a large window overlooking the mountain range. It was his refuge in the house, the only place where he felt truly at ease. "Sophia," he began, sitting on the rug beside his daughter, "I need you to help me understand what happened while I was away." The girl looked at him with her large brown eyes, attentive and intelligent. "You can write or draw to tell me," Gustav suggested, offering a pad of paper and colored pencils. Sophia picked up a black pencil and began to draw. First a figure representing Vanessa, then the shed, and finally a small silhouette that was herself. She added details, a clock showing different times, suggesting the episodes occurred at varied moments, a plate with food and wavy lines coming from it, indicating a bad smell, a bed with the small figure crying, and lastly a telephone with an X. "You couldn't call me?" Gustav asked. Sophia shook her head no and added to the drawing a representation of a padlock on the phone. She blocked the phone. The girl nodded and turned the page to make another drawing. This time she showed the school a teacher and Vanessa. In the drawing, the teacher looked worried, trying to talk to Vanessa, who had her back turned. "The teacher tried to talk to Vanessa about you?" Sophia confirmed and added another detail, a paper with lines that seemed to represent text, followed by a fake signature. "Vanessa forged my signature on some school document." The girl nodded yes, her eyes suddenly welling up. Gustav hugged his daughter, feeling a mixture of anger and guilt. How could he have been so blind? How had he left Sophia vulnerable to such cruelty? "This won't happen again," he promised. "I will protect you." At that moment he made a decision. He needed more proof. He needed to understand the extent of Vanessa's manipulation, and he needed to do it quickly, before she realized he was investigating. After spending the morning with Sophia, playing and reconnecting with his daughter, Gustav left her in Julia's care and headed to the private school where the girl studied. It was a traditional institution in Aspen Ridge, located in a historic mansion near the city center. At the reception, he identified himself and asked to speak with Sophia's teacher. "I'm Gustav Albright, Sophia's father from 2nd grade. I'd like to speak with Ms. Marcia if possible." The receptionist looked at him with a slightly surprised expression. "Mr. Albright, what a coincidence. Your wife was just here yesterday informing us that you were still traveling." Gustav maintained a neutral expression, though he felt a chill down his spine. "It was a last-minute change. I returned earlier than expected. I understand Ms. Marcia is in class now, but she should finish in 20 minutes. You can wait in the teacher's lounge if you prefer." While waiting, Gustav observed the children's artwork displayed on the corridor murals. He looked for any drawing by Sophia but found none. This intrigued him. Ms. Marcia was a woman in her 40s, with a gentle expression and graying hair tied in a simple bun. When she saw him, her face showed clear surprise. "Mr. Albright, I didn't expect to see you. Your wife mentioned you would be away for another 2 weeks. "I came back early," he replied, studying her reaction. "I'm concerned about Sophia. I've noticed some changes in her behavior and would like to know how she's been doing at school." The teacher seemed uncomfortable, looking around as if checking if they were alone. "Can we talk in private? I've been trying to reach you for some time." In the small office adjacent to the teacher's lounge, Marcia closed the door and sat down, her eyes reflecting genuine concern. "Mr. Albright, I've been sending messages and requesting meetings for over 3 months. Your wife always responds that you are busy or traveling, and that she is aware of the situation." "What situation exactly?" "Sophia has changed drastically since the beginning of the year. Before, she was a child who, despite not speaking, actively participated in activities, interacted with classmates through drawings and gestures. But in recent months, she has completely isolated herself. She has visibly lost weight, often arrives tired, sometimes with deep dark circles under her eyes as if she isn't sleeping properly." Gustav felt his heart tighten. "Continue." "Her drawings have also changed. Before they were colorful, full of life. Now they are dark, always depicting enclosed spaces, menacing figures, I even referred Sophia to the school psychologist, who also became concerned. Marcia hesitated before continuing. There were days when Sophia arrived with marks on her arm, as if she had been held tightly. And you didn't contact me directly. Gustav questioned, his voice betraying his indignation. We tried, sir. Several times. Phone calls were never returned. Letters we sent home came back with your signature, authorizing psychological counseling, but requesting that we not bother you with minor matters. The teacher opened a drawer and pulled out a folder. These are copies of the communications. You can check them. Gustav examined the documents, immediately recognizing that the signature was not his. It was a convincing imitation, but with subtle differences that only he would notice. This is not my signature, he declared, feeling anger rise, and I never received any of these letters or calls. The teacher seemed genuinely shocked. Mr. Albright, if I had known. The situation seemed so controlled when your wife came to meetings. She always had plausible explanations for Sophia's behavior, the trauma of her mother's loss, adapting to a new family, a possible anxiety disorder. Marcia, can I take copies of these documents? And I'd like to see Sophia's drawings you mentioned. The teacher nodded, heading to a file cabinet. I saved everything because they seemed like silent cries for help, especially this one. She handed Gustav a drawing where a small figure was clearly locked in a dark space, while a larger figure, with long hair like Vanessa's, watched from outside with an unsettling smile. In the corner of the paper, a word written in childish letters, help. Sophia never... Gustav's voice trailed off. She had never written anything before. Not since the incident that left her mute. It was the first and only text she produced in months. When I tried to talk to her about the drawing, she simply shut down even more. Leaving the school, Gustav felt as if he carried an overwhelming weight on his shoulders. Guilt for having failed as a father, anger for having been so completely deceived, fear for what Sophia might have suffered while he was busy expanding his businesses. In the car, he re-examined the copies of the documents and the drawings. One detail caught his attention, the stamp of Dr. Raymond Miles, psychologist, on one of the reports. The name was linked to a mental health clinic in Aspen Ridge. Determined to get to the bottom of the story, Gustav adjusted the car's GPS and drove to the clinic. It was time to personally meet the doctor Vanessa had mentioned so much and understand exactly what kind of treatment was being planned for Sophia. The Aspen Ridge Clinic occupied a modern building near the historic downtown of Aspen Ridge. With a mirrored glass facade and minimalist decor, it conveyed an impression of sophistication that contrasted with the old mansions around it. At the reception, an attendant with a meticulously trained smile greeted Gustav. Good afternoon. How can I help you? I'd like to speak with Dr. Raymond Miles, Gustav replied, maintaining a casual tone. It's about my daughter, Sophia Albright. The receptionist consulted her computer. Do you have an appointment? No, but it's an urgent matter. I'm Gustav Albright, Sophia's father. My wife Vanessa must have already spoken to him about the case. Upon hearing the name, the receptionist's expression subtly changed. Ah, yes, Mrs. Vanessa was here the day before yesterday. Let me check if the doctor can see you. While waiting, Gustav observed the environment. The waiting room was empty, except for a middle-aged woman flipping through a magazine. On the wall, several diplomas and certifications, many under different names. The clinic seemed to house various specialists. After a few minutes, the receptionist returned. Dr. Miles can see you for 15 minutes between appointments. Please follow me. Gustav was led down a silent corridor to a room at the end. The door opened, revealing a man of approximately 50, with graying hair and thin-rimmed glasses. His office was impeccably tidy, with carefully organized bookshelves and a glass desk without a single paper out of place. Mr. Albright, the doctor greeted, extending his hand. What a surprise. Your wife mentioned you would be traveling until the end of the month. I returned early, Gustav replied, shaking the offered hand with studied firmness. I'm concerned about my daughter and came to seek information directly. The doctor indicated a chair and sat behind his desk. Understandable. Sophia's case is complex. I'd like to understand exactly what diagnosis you've made and what treatment is being proposed, Gustav said, maintaining a cordial tone, though he felt anger simmering beneath the surface. Dr. Raymond adjusted his glasses. a gesture that seemed calculated to buy time. Well, based on your wife's reports and the few sessions I've had with Sophia, we've identified signs of a developmental disorder possibly exacerbated by the trauma of maternal loss. The girl exhibits isolation behavior, episodes of controlled aggression, and of course selective mutism. Aggression? Gustav questioned, frowning. Sophia has never been aggressive. According to your wife, there have been incidents at home, destruction of personal items, refusal to obey basic rules, even episodes where Sophia allegedly self-harmed. Gustav felt his blood run cold. That is absolutely false. My daughter has never exhibited such behaviors. The doctor seemed slightly disconcerted, but quickly recovered. I understand your reaction, Mr. Albright. It's common for parents to have difficulty accepting certain diagnoses. But I assure you we are following strict protocols. And what would be the recommended treatment? Gustav asked, controlling his voice. Initially, I proposed intensive behavioral therapy 3 times a week. However, given the worsening of symptoms reported by your wife, we are considering a more structured approach. Structured? The doctor opened a drawer and retrieved a folder. A temporary inpatient stay in our specialized children's wing. A controlled environment where Sophia could receive constant attention from our multidisciplinary team. Gustav looked at the folder the doctor handed him. Inside, he found authorization forms for inpatient care, already filled out with Sophia's data. Only his signature was missing. Who filled out these documents? He asked, his voice now cold as ice. Your wife provided the necessary information. She mentioned you would agree given the severity of the situation. And you didn't find it strange that I, the father and legal guardian, was not present to discuss my own daughter's inpatient care. The doctor hesitated visibly. Mrs. Vanessa explained that you were extremely busy with business in the Pacific Northwest and that you fully trusted her. Judgment regarding Sophia's care. Gustav felt bile rise in his throat as he realized how meticulously Vanessa had planned everything. She had not only emotionally distanced him from Sophia, but was also about to physically remove her from his life. Dr. Miles, Gustav said, leaning forward, I'm going to be direct. I strongly suspect my wife is manipulating information about my daughter's health. I have evidence that Sophia is being mistreated at home, not due to a psychological disorder, but due to deliberate abuse perpetrated by Vanessa. The doctor paled slightly. That's a very serious accusation, Mr. Albright. As serious as hospitalizing a healthy child under false pretenses, Gustav retorted. He opened his folder and spread Sophia's drawings, copies of the documents with forged signatures, and photos he had taken of the rotten lettuce leaf across the desk. This is just the beginning of the evidence. I have witnesses willing to confirm Vanessa's abusive behavior when I'm absent. The doctor examined the materials, his professional demeanor giving way to an expression of genuine concern. I had no access to any of this. Mrs. Vanessa painted a completely different picture. I imagine so. And now, Doctor, I need to know, are you genuinely mistaken or are you complicit in this scheme? Dr. Miles seemed truly offended. Mr. Albright, I am an ethical professional. If I was misled, it was because I received false information. I would never knowingly participate in any action that would harm a child. Gustav studied the doctor for a moment, trying to discern if his indignation was authentic. Something in the man's reaction made him decide to take a risk. In that case, Doctor, I need your help. Vanessa cannot know that I was here, or that I suspect her intentions. I need time to gather more evidence and ensure Sophia's safety. The doctor seemed genuinely disturbed. What exactly are you suggesting? I want you to continue acting normally with Vanessa. Tell her that the preparations for the inpatient care are progressing, but invent some bureaucracy, some additional necessary examination, something that delays the process for at least a week. That would be unethical. If I believed the girl truly needed inpatient care, the doctor pondered, and isn't it unethical to prepare for inpatient care based solely on one person's account, without verifying the facts with both guardians or investigating properly? Gustav retorted. The doctor sighed, taking off his glasses to clean them, a gesture that now seemed more nervous than calculated. Touché. What happened to Sophia? The mutism. It was the result of trauma, correct? Yes, she was present when her mother. Gustav hesitated, the memory still painful. When Cecilia suffered a fulminant brain aneurysm, Sophia was only 4 years old. Since then, she hasn't uttered a single word. And did she receive counseling before? Yes, for almost 2 years. With an excellent child psychologist in New York City, Dr. Louisa Forbes. Sophia made slow but consistent progress until what? Until I remarried. Vanessa insisted we move to Aspen Ridge, to this house that belonged to her family, away from Sophia's friends, the school she knew, the therapist she had a bond with. At the time, it seemed like a reasonable idea, a new beginning for everyone. Now I realize it was the first step to isolate Sophia. The doctor made some notes. I will help you, Mr. Albright. Not because I blindly believe your version, but because I now have enough doubts to justify a more careful investigation. I will request an independent evaluation of Sophia with another professional, without informing your wife. And I will delay any inpatient procedures. Thank you, Gustav said, feeling a slight relief for the first time that day. I need your card. I prefer to contact you directly, without going through the clinic reception. Leaving the clinic, Gustav checked his watch. It was past 3 in the afternoon, and Vanessa would probably be returning from the charity lunch. He needed to return to the estate before she suspected anything. During the drive, his cell phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Mr. Albright? The female voice on the other end sounded apprehensive. This is Chloe, the former housekeeper. Gustav almost slammed on the brakes in the middle of the road. Chloe, how did you get my number? Julia contacted me. She said you're back and investigating. Yes, I am, and I very much need to talk to you. Vanessa told me you were fired for theft. A sound of indignation came from the other end of the line. Theft? I never took a pin that didn't belong to me in that house. I was fired because I caught Mrs. Vanessa locking Sophia in the basement for an entire night. When I confronted her, she accused me of stealing jewelry and threw me out without references. She threatened to sue me if I said anything. Gustav felt his stomach churn. The basement? Not just the shed. That shed was just for light punishments, according to her. The basement. That's where Sophia stayed when Mrs. Vanessa was really furious. My God, Gustav whispered. Chloe, would you be willing to testify about this? Legally. That's why I'm calling, sir. I haven't slept properly since I left that house. I keep thinking about little Sophia, so defenseless. The woman's voice broke. I'll do whatever it takes to help her. Where can we meet? It needs to be discreet. I have a sister in Evergreen. I can meet you there tomorrow. After writing down the address, Gustav thanked her and hung up, feeling simultaneously encouraged by the new ally and horrified by the revelations. Arriving home, he found Vanessa in the living room, elegant in her designer dress, talking animatedly on the phone. When she saw him, she quickly ended the call. Oh, darling, you're here. Lunch was wonderful. Everyone asked about you. She approached to kiss him, but Gustav subtly turned his face so her lips touched his cheek. Where's Sophia? He asked, taking off his jacket. In her room, resting. She got so tired after her walk in the garden. Vanessa smiled, but her eyes remained vigilant. Where have you been all afternoon? I tried calling several times. I had to take care of some things at the office. Gustav lied easily. I had some documents that couldn't wait. I left my cell phone in the car. I see, Vanessa replied, though her tone suggested otherwise. Well, I have news. I spoke with Dr. Raymond today, and he agrees that intensive treatment would be most suitable for Sophia. He prepared all the documentation for us to discuss. Gustav forced himself to maintain a neutral expression. What kind of intensive treatment? A temporary inpatient stay, just a few weeks, Vanessa explained, her tone casual as if discussing a hotel reservation. His clinic has an excellent children's wing. Sophia would have constant supervision away from stimuli that might worsen her condition. Away from me, you mean, Gustav thought, but only nodded thoughtfully. It seems like a serious decision. I'll want to talk to this doctor personally before signing anything. A shadow of annoyance crossed Vanessa's face, before returning even more radiant. Of course, darling. But the doctor has a packed schedule for the next few weeks. We could start the process and you could meet him later. No, Gustav replied firmly. Nothing will be decided without me speaking to him first. Sophia is my daughter, and I will not make decisions about her health based solely on third-party reports. Vanessa's smile froze for an instant before returning even more radiant. You are such a dedicated father. That's why I love you so much. I'll try to schedule an appointment as soon as possible. Great, now I'm going to see Sophia. In his daughter's room, he found her not resting, as Vanessa had said, but sitting on the floor in a corner, clutching the old plush rabbit, her eyes red from recent crying. When she saw him, her face brightened a little. Gustav sat beside her on the floor, hugging her gently. "It's all right, princess. Daddy's here now." Sophia picked up her drawing pad and handed it to Gustav. On it there was a new drawing, Vanessa on the phone, with speech bubbles containing words like inpatient care, control, and signature. Beside it, a representation of Sophia herself in what looked like a cell or hospital room. "You heard Vanessa talking about putting you in the clinic?" Gustav asked in a low voice. The girl nodded, her eyes full of fear. "That's not going to happen," he assured her, hugging her again. "I promise I won't let anyone take you." That night, dinner passed in an atmosphere of false normalcy. Vanessa spoke animatedly about the charity event, the contacts she had made, the plans for the foundation. Gustav responded with polite monosyllables, while Sophia played with her food, occasionally looking at her father as if seeking reassurance. "Oh, I almost forgot," Vanessa exclaimed at one point. "Richard and Claudia invited us for a weekend at their house in Santa Barbara. It would be perfect for us to relax before Sophia's treatment begins." "I don't think it's a good time for trips," Gustav replied calmly. "I prefer to stay home with Sophia." Vanessa's fork made a sharp noise against her plate. "But it would be great for the three of us to spend some time together, as a family. You've been working so hard lately." "Precisely why I want to stay home. Dedicating time to my daughter." Gustav emphasized the possessive, observing Vanessa's reaction. A tense silence settled over the table, broken only by the sound of Julia collecting the plates. The maid avoided looking directly at any of them, but Gustav noticed her tension. "How are you feeling, dear?" Vanessa asked, suddenly turning to Sophia with an artificial smile. "Excited to see the special clinic Dr. Raymond showed Mommy?" Sophia visibly shrank, and Gustav felt a wave of fury rise within him. How dared Vanessa torment the child like this? "Sophia isn't going to any clinic," he said, keeping his voice controlled despite his anger. "Not until I am absolutely convinced it's necessary." Vanessa's eyes hardened momentarily, but her smile remained. "Of course, darling. I was just trying to familiarize her with the idea. Children need preparation for changes." After dinner, when Sophia was already in bed, Gustav retreated to his study, claiming he needed to work. In reality, he wanted distance from Vanessa while he organized his thoughts and planned his next steps. Sitting at his desk, he opened his laptop and began to compile everything he had discovered so far. He needed to document every piece of evidence, every testimony, every inconsistency in Vanessa's story. If it became necessary to file for divorce and sole custody, he would be prepared. A gentle knock at the door interrupted him. It was Julia carrying a tray with tea. "I thought you might want something to drink while you work," she said, entering after his consent. As she placed the tray on the desk, Julia leaned slightly and whispered, "Mrs. Vanessa went out to the garden to smoke. I know she hides it from you because of the supposed pregnancy. I thought you should know." Gustav nodded, silently thanking her. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. If Vanessa were truly pregnant, she wouldn't be smoking in secret. "Julia," he called as the maid was at the door, "did you ever see Sophia locked in the basement?" The young woman's face paled. "Yes, sir, once. The night you called to say you would extend your trip for another week." Mrs. Vanessa was furious after hanging up, as if the news had deeply upset her. When Sophia spilled a glass of milk, she dragged her to the basement and left her there for hours. Gustav closed his eyes, feeling a physical pain at the thought of his daughter's terror. "Thank you for telling me. I will resolve this, Julia. Please continue to keep an eye on Sophia." When the maid left, Gustav remained motionless for a few minutes, fighting the urge to confront Vanessa immediately. He couldn't act rashly. He needed the perfect plan to ensure Sophia would never suffer at that woman's hands again. The next morning dawned grey, with a thick fog enveloping the mansion, typical of the mountain autumn. Gustav woke early after a restless night's sleep. He had slept on the study sofa, claiming pending work. In truth, he couldn't bear the thought of lying next to Vanessa. knowing what he now knew. He took a quick shower in the guest bathroom and went to the kitchen, where he found Julia preparing breakfast. "Good morning, sir," she greeted in a low voice. "Mrs. Albright and the young lady are not yet awake." "Good," Gustav replied. "Julia, I'm going out for a few hours. I need to meet the former housekeeper in Evergreen. If Vanessa asks, tell her I went to the office to resolve some outstanding issues." The maid nodded, concern evident on her young face. "What about Sophia? Mrs. Vanessa seemed agitated last night after you retired." "What do you mean?" "She made several calls." She spoke softly but seemed anxious. "I heard something about speeding up the process and securing the signature." Gustav felt a shiver run down his spine. "Keep an eye on Sophia. Do not leave her alone with Vanessa under any circumstances. Invent excuses. Say you need to help her with schoolwork, anything." "Yes, sir. I'll do my best." Before leaving, Gustav quietly passed Sophia's room. The girl was still asleep, her expression finally serene, clutching her plush rabbit. For a moment he considered waking her, taking her with him, fleeing that house of horrors, but he knew that an impulsive action could compromise everything. He needed a solid plan, irrefutable proof. He gently kissed his daughter's forehead and left, silently promising to return soon. The drive to Evergreen, a neighboring district of Aspen Ridge, took about 20 minutes along the winding road that cut through the mountains. Chloe's sister's house was a simple 2-story building with a small, well-tended front garden. Chloe awaited him on the porch, a robust, middle-aged woman with grey hair tied in a simple bun. Her wrinkled face bore an expression of genuine concern. "Mr. Albright," she greeted, indicating a wicker chair beside her. "Thank you for coming. I should be thanking you, Chloe. I need to understand everything that happened." The former housekeeper sighed deeply. "I've worked with families for over 30 years, sir. I've seen a lot, but never—" She hesitated, searching for words. "Never have I seen anyone mask cruelty with such perfection as Mrs. Vanessa. Why didn't you try to contact me before?" "I tried, sir. Several times, but your calls were always filtered by the secretary. And after Mrs. Vanessa threatened me with a lawsuit for defamation and theft, I got scared. I have a sick granddaughter to care for. I couldn't risk it." Gustav nodded, understanding the woman's dilemma. "Tell me everything from the beginning." For the next hour, Chloe detailed a pattern of abuse that made Gustav's blood boil. According to her, the mistreatment began subtly. Forgotten meals, excessively severe reprimands, disproportionately small punishments. Over time, they became more serious. Sophia was locked in her room for hours, deprived of water, forced to eat food that made her sick. "The worst started when you increased your travel pace. At the beginning of the year," Chloe explained. "Mrs. Vanessa seemed pleased with your absences. When you called to speak with Sophia, she always invented excuses. The girl was asleep or in the bath or unwell." "And the basement? When did that start?" Chloe wiped a tear. "It was after an argument about your will. I overheard by chance. Mrs. Vanessa was on the phone with someone, saying she needed to secure her position if something happened to you. That she was frustrated because even as your wife, most of the inheritance was still destined for Sophia." Gustav frowned. He had never discussed his will with Vanessa. "How did she know such details?" 2 nights later," Chloe continued, "you called saying you would extend your trip. Mrs. Vanessa was furious. When Sophia came to ask when her father would return, she dragged her to the basement, saying it was time to learn to be quiet once and for all. She locked her there for an entire night. My God," Gustav murmured, feeling physically ill. "The next morning, when Mrs. Vanessa left for breakfast with friends, I went down to the basement with food and water for the girl. Sophia was huddled in a corner, trembling. She had wet her clothes out of fear." Chloe's voice broke. "That's when I decided to confront Mrs. Vanessa, and the same day I was fired. Would you have the courage to report all of this officially? To the police or a judge if necessary?" "Yes, sir. I even have a notebook where I wrote down dates and details so I wouldn't forget." Chloe stood up and went to a drawer, from which she took a small blue notebook. "Here it is. I kept a record of everything I witnessed in case one day you discovered the truth." Gustav flipped through the notebook, where he found dozens of entries detailing incidents of abuse and neglect, all carefully dated. It was precious evidence. "May I keep this?" "That's how I see, of course." "I made copies for safety." Before leaving, Gustav asked about something that intrigued him. "Chloe, You mentioned Vanessa talking to someone on the phone about the will. Do you have any idea who it might be? The former housekeeper hesitated. I'm not sure, but I heard the name Theo several times. And once, while cleaning the office, I saw a photo hidden in a drawer. Mrs. Vanessa hugging a young, well-dressed man. They seemed intimate. Another piece of the puzzle. Gustav thanked Chloe and promised to keep her informed of developments. On the way back to Aspen Ridge, he stopped at a discreet cafe and made 3 important calls: to his trusted lawyer in New York City, to a private investigator recommended by him, and to Dr. Louisa Forbes, Sophia's former therapist. Back at the mansion, he found a strange atmosphere. Vanessa was in the living room, impeccably dressed and made up as if expecting visitors. Beside her, a man in a dark suit whom Gustav didn't recognize. "Oh, darling, finally," Vanessa exclaimed, rising to greet him with a kiss he subtly avoided. "This is Dr. Albert Maxwell, a child psychiatrist whom Dr. Raymond recommended for a second opinion on Sophia." The man extended his hand. "Pleasure, Mr. Albright. Your wife explained your daughter's delicate situation to me." Gustav shook the offered hand coldly, alarmed by this new development. "I don't recall authorizing a home consultation, Doctor." "It was my suggestion," Vanessa quickly interjected. "Dr. Raymond mentioned you would like a second opinion, and I thought it would be less stressful for Sophia to be evaluated in a familiar environment." The manipulation was so blatant that Gustav almost laughed. "Interesting, considering I haven't even spoken to Dr. Raymond yet." A flicker of panic crossed Vanessa's eyes, but she recovered instantly. "Oh, he must have presumed from what I said. In any case, Dr. Maxwell is very much in demand. It was a stroke of luck to get him to visit today." "Where is Sophia?" Gustav asked, ignoring the flimsy explanation. "In her room with Julia, finishing her snack. Dr. Maxwell would like to speak with her alone, if possible." "No," Gustav replied categorically. "No professional will see my daughter without my presence, and without me having properly verified their credentials." The psychiatrist seemed surprised by the firm refusal. "Mr. Albright, I understand your concern. If you prefer, we can just talk today, the 3 of us, about therapeutic options." "Dr. Maxwell," Gustav said, looking the man directly in the eye, "I appreciate your visit, but I need to speak alone with my wife before any consultation." "If you could excuse us?" The doctor looked at Vanessa, who nodded slightly, her smile frozen on her face. "Of course. I'll be at the clinic this afternoon, should you decide to proceed." As soon as the man left, Vanessa turned to Gustav, her eyes now cold as ice. "What was that? Are you sabotaging the treatment Sophia desperately needs?" "No, Vanessa. I'm preventing you from using doctors for your own ends." She took a step back, her mask of perfection momentarily shaken. "What are you talking about? All I did was seek help for your problematic daughter." "My daughter is not problematic," Gustav retorted, keeping his voice low, aware that Sophia might hear. "She is traumatized. And you have systematically aggravated that trauma." Vanessa let out a forced laugh. "Are you accusing me of something?" "Based on what? The childish drawings of a disturbed child?" "Based on concrete evidence, witness testimonies, and my daughter's behavior, which has changed drastically since you entered our lives." Gustav took a step forward. "I know about the basement, Vanessa. I know about the spoiled food, the confinements, the humiliations. I know you forged my signature on school documents, and I know you're not pregnant." Her face lost color for an instant, but she recovered with impressive speed. "You're delusional," she declared, her voice now trembling with performative indignation. "How dare you accuse me of such monstrosities? I, who sacrificed my career to care for your mute and difficult daughter. Your little act may work on strangers, but not on me." "Not anymore." Gustav stood firm. "I want you to pack your bags and leave this house by the end of the day." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, the mask of fragility completely abandoned. "You can't kick me out. I'm your wife. A wife who abuses a defenseless child doesn't deserve that title, and we have a very clear prenuptial agreement about grounds for annulment of marriage." A cold smile formed on her lips. "It would be your word against mine, Gustav. A respected businesswoman against a workaholic father who barely knows his own daughter. Who do you think a judge would believe?" "Shall I have evidence, Vanessa, and witnesses?" "That little maid? Please." Vanessa made a dismissive gesture. "No one will credit an uneducated cleaner." What about Chloe? And Sophia's teacher? And the videos from the cameras you yourself installed? This caught her by surprise. Vanessa visibly paled. What videos? Do you think I wouldn't check the recordings after finding out about the cameras? Everything is documented, Vanessa. Every moment you mistreated my daughter when you thought no one was looking. It was a bluff. Gustav hadn't yet located the recordings, but by the panic in Vanessa's eyes, he hit the mark. You don't understand, she said, suddenly changing tactics. Sophia needs discipline. She manipulates you with that silence, that feigned fragility. I just tried to set boundaries. Locking a child in a basement is not setting boundaries. It's abuse. At that moment, a movement at the living room door caught both their attention. Sophia was standing there watching them with wide eyes. Behind her, Julia looked distressed. Sorry, sir. She heard raised voices and insisted on coming. Sophia ran to her father, clinging to his leg as if fearing she would be torn from him at any moment. Vanessa adjusted her expression instantly, kneeling to be at the girl's height. Sophia, darling, don't worry. Daddy and Mommy are just talking about your treatment. Remember we talked about that special place where you'll stay to get better? The girl shrank even further against her father, her small body trembling. Enough, Vanessa, Gustav said, lifting Sophia into his arms protectively. I won't repeat myself. Pack your bags and leave. Vanessa's face hardened, all pretense of affection disappearing. This isn't over, Gustav. Sophia needs specialized treatment, and I have medical documents to prove it. If it's not the easy way, it will be the hard way. With those words, she turned on her heel and left the room, heading for the stairs. Gustav hugged Sophia tighter, feeling his daughter's heart beating fast against his chest. It's all right now, princess, he murmured, kissing the top of her head. No one is going to take you anywhere. Julia approached, visibly shaken. Sir, I accidentally overheard part of the conversation. Mrs. Vanessa seemed threatening. Yes, she showed her true colors, Gustav agreed. Julia, I need you to stay with Sophia in the study. Lock the door from the inside and don't open it for anyone but me. I'll supervise Vanessa's departure and ensure she takes nothing but her personal belongings. The maid nodded, extending her arms to Sophia. The girl hesitated, reluctant to let go of her father. I'll be fine, Gustav assured her, stroking her hair. And I'll be back for you soon. I promise. Reluctantly, Sophia allowed Julia to take her. Before leaving the room, the girl looked back, her large eyes conveying a clear message. Be careful. Gustav went upstairs, heading to the master bedroom. He found Vanessa haphazardly throwing clothes into an open suitcase on the bed, her face contorted with fury. Need help packing your things? He asked coldly. She shot him a venomous look. You'll regret this. No one humiliates me like this and gets away with it. Believe me, Vanessa, I am being extremely restrained. If I acted on my instincts after what you did to my daughter, your precious daughter, she scoffed, throwing more clothes into the suitcase. What does Sophia have that our child wouldn't? Why does your entire empire go to that mute creature and not to a worthy heir? The pieces finally clicked into place. So it's about money. It always was. Don't be naive, Gustav. Do you really think a woman like me would marry a middle-aged widower with a problematic child for love? Vanessa let out a cruel laugh. The plan was perfect. You always traveling, focused on your business. I gradually taking control of the domestic situation, isolating Sophia, creating a scenario where hospitalizing her would be the only logical option. Then a child of ours, and finally the guarantee that your fortune would have a proper destination. And for that you were willing to psychologically torture an innocent child. Vanessa shrugged, a casual gesture that contrasted with the monstrosity of her actions. Sophia was always an acceptable collateral damage. Gustav felt nauseous. How could he have been so blind? How had he not perceived the true nature of the woman he had married? Who is Theo? He asked suddenly. Vanessa's movement froze for an instant. How? Who is he, Vanessa? Your lover? Accomplice? She resumed packing, avoiding his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about. I have a private investigator working on this right now. I will find out with or without your cooperation. An enigmatic smile appeared on Vanessa's lips. Good luck with that. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to finish packing my things in peace. Gustav left the room, leaving the door open. He didn't trust Vanessa enough to leave her unsupervised. He positioned himself in the hallway from where he could observe her and took the opportunity to call his lawyer. "Richard, I need you to expedite those procedures we discussed." "Yes, the situation has escalated. She's leaving the house today, but she's made threats." As he spoke, he noticed Vanessa furtively moving towards the dresser, from which she quickly took something and hid it in her purse. A quick check when she went to the bathroom revealed that some documents had been removed from a folder, probably papers related to the family's finances or Sophia's supposed treatment. Half an hour later, Vanessa came downstairs with 2 large suitcases, a handbag, and an expression of cold determination. "I'm going to the apartment in Los Angeles," she announced. "My lawyer will contact yours. Don't think this is over." "On the contrary," Gustav replied calmly, "this is just beginning, and I suggest you think carefully before trying anything against Sophia or me. The consequences would be unpleasant." Vanessa held his gaze for a moment, a calculating glint in her eyes. "See you soon, Gustav." When the front door closed behind her, Gustav felt an immense weight lift from his shoulders. The battle wasn't won, far from it, but the first step had been taken. Sophia was temporarily safe. He headed to the study and knocked lightly. "It's me," he announced. The door opened, revealing Julia and Sophia sitting on the sofa. The girl looked up anxiously. "She's gone," Gustav informed, smiling for the first time in days. "And she won't be back any time soon." Sophia ran into his arms, her small body finally relaxing. Over his daughter's head, Gustav exchanged a meaningful look with Julia. "This isn't over, is it?" the maid asked in a low voice. "No," Gustav confirmed, stroking Sophia's hair. "She'll retaliate, and we need to be ready." The next 3 days brought a tense peace to the Albright estate. Gustav reorganized his schedule, cancelling all planned trips for the coming weeks. Sophia, though still silent, showed small signs of improvement. She smiled more, slept better, and even her drawings featured more vibrant colors. On that sunny Sunday morning, father and daughter were having breakfast on the veranda, enjoying the fresh mountain air. Sophia ate pancakes with strawberries, her appetite visibly improved, while Gustav discreetly checked his cell phone, looking for messages from the private investigator he had hired. "Sir, you have a visitor," Julia announced, appearing at the door. Her tense expression indicated that it was not a common visit. "Who is it?" Gustav asked, instinctively placing himself between the door and Sophia. "A court officer, sir. And she's accompanied by a doctor and a social worker." Gustav felt his blood run cold. He had expected retaliation from Vanessa, but not so quickly. "Sophia, stay here with Julia, okay? Daddy needs to handle something." The girl grabbed his arm, her eyes wide with panic. "It's going to be okay, princess," he assured her, kissing her forehead. "No one is going to take you, I promise." In the living room, a woman in a dark suit waited, a briefcase in her hands. Beside her, a man in a white lab coat and a middle-aged woman with a stern expression. "Mr. Gustav Albright?" the officer asked, her voice professional and distant. "Yes, that's me." "What is this about?" "I am Carmen Whitaker, court officer. I am here to deliver a judicial notification and to execute a precautionary measure issued by Judge Charles Edward Mason of the Second Family Court of Aspen Ridge." She handed him a document, which Gustav took with steady hands, despite the internal storm he felt. "This is a warrant for an emergency psychological evaluation of the minor Sophia Albright, aged 7, based on complaints of parental neglect and refusal of necessary medical treatment." "This is absurd," Gustav protested, though he had expected something of the sort. "Who filed this complaint?" "Mrs. Vanessa Montgomery Albright, spouse and stepmother of the minor, supported by medical reports from Dr. Raymond Miles and Dr. Albert Maxwell." The officer maintained a neutral tone, but her eyes showed a slight compassion. "Dr. Oliver and Dr. Sandra Shaw are the professionals designated by the court to conduct the evaluation. The presence of the social worker is to ensure the child's rights during the procedure." Gustav took a deep breath, fighting to remain calm. "I understand. May I see your credentials, please?" After carefully verifying everyone's documentation, including the unfortunately legitimate court order, Gustav adopted a cooperative, though vigilant stance. "May I be present during the evaluation?" "Unfortunately not, sir," replied the social worker, Dr. Shaw. The judge explicitly determined that the evaluation be conducted without the presence of the guardians to avoid any kind of influence. "My daughter doesn't speak," Gustav explained, trying to control his frustration. "She has been mute since the trauma of her mother's loss 3 years ago. How do you intend to evaluate her without someone who understands her way of communication?" "We are professionals trained to deal with children in various conditions," Dr. Oliver replied, with slight condescension. "There are non-verbal methods of psychological evaluation." Gustav realized he had no immediate choice. Fighting a court order would only harm his position. He needed to be strategic. "Very well. But I have some non-negotiable conditions. The evaluation will be conducted right here, in a familiar environment for Sophia. I will remain in the house, though not in the same room, and everything will be video recorded to ensure the transparency of the procedure." The court officer quickly consulted the text of the warrant. "The document does not prohibit these conditions, as long as there is no interference with the evaluation." "In that case, you may proceed," Gustav agreed. "I will fetch my daughter." When he returned to the veranda, he found Sophia huddled against Julia as if sensing danger. "Princess," he said, kneeling to be at her eye level. "There are some people here who need to talk to you. They are doctors, like Dr. Peterson you used to see in New York City, remember?" Sophia nodded hesitantly. "They will ask some questions, show drawings, things like that. You don't have to speak. You can communicate however you prefer, drawings, gestures, writing. Daddy can't stay in the room, but I'll be very close by in the kitchen. If you need me, just call Julia, okay?" The girl gripped his hand tightly, shaking her head no. "I know you're scared, my love, but we need to do this. It's important to show these people the truth." Gustav caressed her delicate face. "Remember what I always say. The truth always wins, even if it takes a little while." Sophia hesitated, but finally nodded, though her eyes remained full of apprehension. "I'll be nearby the whole time," Gustav promised again, standing up. To Julia, he murmured discreetly, "Stay in the hallway. If you notice anything strange, call me immediately." The evaluation was conducted in the living room, with Sophia sitting on the sofa, clutching her plush rabbit. The doctor and social worker positioned themselves in chairs in front of her, while the court officer remained standing, observing. Julia stayed in the hallway as instructed, and Gustav waited in the kitchen, close enough to hear if Sophia called him. During the agonizing wait, Gustav took the opportunity to call his lawyer. "Richard, they're here. A doctor, a social worker, and a court officer, with a warrant for Sophia's psychological evaluation." "Already? That was fast," Richard replied, surprised. "Vanessa must have connections in the local judiciary. I'm leaving New York City right now. I'll be in Aspen Ridge in 3 hours at most. What should I do in the meantime?" "Cooperate, but document everything. Record, photograph, take notes, and prepare yourself. If the report is unfavorable, they might try a more drastic measure." "What do you mean?" Gustav asked, feeling a knot in his stomach. "A temporary custody order for involuntary inpatient care, based on imminent risk to the minor's mental health. I saw this happen in a similar case last year." "My God," Gustav murmured. "Is that legal?" "Unfortunately, yes, in specific circumstances. But we have countermeasures prepared. We just need time." After an hour that felt like an eternity, the living room door opened. Sophia immediately ran into her father's arms, trembling slightly. "How did it go?" Gustav asked the professionals, hugging his daughter protectively. The social worker and doctor exchanged enigmatic glances. "We conducted a preliminary evaluation," Dr. Oliver replied formally. "We applied projective tests and observed the child's behavior. Our report will be submitted to the judge in 48 hours. "And what was your impression?" Gustav insisted. "We are not authorized to discuss conclusions before the report is finalized," the social worker interjected. "But I can say that Sophia cooperated adequately, within her limitations." The court officer approached with another document. "This is a notification for a preliminary hearing, scheduled for next Wednesday at 2 p.m. in the second family court. Your presence is mandatory. Mr. Albright, the child does not need to attend this phase." Gustav took the document, feeling the weight of what was to come. "I'll be there." After the visitors left, Sophia finally relaxed a little, though she still clung to her father as if fearing she would be torn from him at any moment. "How did she really do?" Gustav asked Julia, who had observed everything from the hallway. They showed her drawings, figures, asked questions that she answered by nodding yes or no. They asked her to draw her family, her house. The maid hesitated. They asked many questions about Mrs. Vanessa. They asked if she had ever been punished and how. And what did Sophia answer? She drew the shed, the basement, and Mrs. Vanessa screaming. It was quite explicit. Julia wrung her hands nervously. The doctor seemed surprised, but the social worker looked very serious. I can't say if they believed her or thought it was fantasy. Gustav hugged Sophia tighter. You were very brave, Princess. Thank you very much for showing the truth. The rest of Sunday passed in an attempt at forced normalcy. Gustav took Sophia for a picnic in the garden, read stories, watched cartoons, anything to distract her from the tension that hung over them. The next morning, he received 2 important calls. The first from the private investigator. I have information about this, Theo, he announced without preamble. Theo Montgomery, 32, a lawyer specializing in corporate law, and coincidentally your wife's first cousin. Cousin, Gustav repeated, surprised. Vanessa never mentioned having a close cousin. They grew up together, from what I gather. Very close, perhaps too intimate, if you know what I mean. I found records of substantial bank transfers from Mrs. Vanessa's personal account to him over the past 8 months. And most interestingly, he recently opened a law office in Aspen Ridge, 6 blocks from Dr. Raymond Miles's clinic. Can you send everything you found to my lawyer? It's already on its way. Oh, and one more thing. Your secretary, Renata Oliver. I found out she frequented the same gym as Theo in New York City before you hired her. The recommendation for the position came from Vanessa, right? Yes, Gustav replied, realizing the extent of the conspiracy. Vanessa met her at a fashion event and insisted I needed a more efficient secretary. Well, it seems your wife planned everything well in advance. I'll keep you informed of any new developments. The second call was from Dr. Louisa Forbes, Sophia's former therapist in New York City. I managed to reschedule my agenda and can be in Aspen Ridge tomorrow morning, she informed him. I'm bringing all the records of my sessions with Sophia, including evaluations that directly contradict Dr. Raymond's supposed diagnoses. You don't know how much that means to us. Doctor, Sophia is a special child, Gustav. I always knew her mutism was a response to trauma, not a permanent disorder. With the right environment and appropriate therapy, she has every chance of recovery. The therapist's voice hardened. And I will do everything in my power to prevent them from using her silence against her. Throughout the day, Gustav received another worrying piece of news. Dr. Raymond Miles had reneged on his promise to help. Richard, his lawyer, brought the information upon arriving at the mansion late that afternoon. He claims he was misled by you, Richard explained, visibly irritated. He says you distorted information about Sophia's behavior and manipulated the situation to incriminate him. That's completely false, Gustav protested. We know that, but he is now firmly in Vanessa's camp, and he brought a new ally, Dr. Albert Maxwell, the psychiatrist who came to your house. Both have signed reports stating that Sophia exhibits critical signs of severe emotional disorder, exacerbated by the father's refusal to accept adequate treatment. Gustav sank into the sofa, trying to process the information. How did she manage to turn him against us so quickly? Richard hesitated before replying. My contact at the courthouse mentioned that Dr. Raymond has problems with the state medical board. Something related to the irregular prescription of controlled medications, the kind of thing that could be exploited by someone unscrupulous. Blackmail, Gustav concluded, feeling the nausea return. She's capable of anything. We need to be prepared for the worst-case scenario at Wednesday's hearing, Richard warned. Vanessa hired Claude Miller, one of Los Angeles' most aggressive family lawyers. He's known for shock tactics in custody cases. What can we expect? Personal attacks. They'll try to discredit you as a father, highlight your long absences, insinuate neglect. They might even claim you're having a mental breakdown, inventing accusations against Vanessa out of guilt or inability to cope with Sophia's condition. Gustav ran his hands over his face, feeling the weight of the entire situation. And what about Sophia? Is there a real risk they'll get temporary custody? There is, Richard admitted grimly. If they convince the judge that there's an imminent risk to her mental health, they could get an involuntary inpatient order for intensive evaluation. Normally it would be for 72 hours, but with the right medical reports it could be extended. And once they take her from here, exactly. It would be much harder to reverse the situation. Richard adjusted his glasses, a gesture Gustav already knew as a sign of more unpleasant news. There's another problem. Judge Charles Edward Mason. He's known for favoring interventionist medical approaches in cases involving children with psychological challenges. In a recent case, he ordered the inpatient care of a teenager against her parents' wishes, based solely on psychiatric reports. We're at a disadvantage, Gustav concluded. For now, yes. But I have some strategies in mind. Richard opened his briefcase and spread documents on the coffee table. First, I'm preparing a motion to disqualify Dr. Raymond and Dr. Albert, based on conflict of interest and possible collusion. Second, we have the testimonies of Chloe, Julia, and Sophia's teacher, all corroborating the abuse claims. Third, Dr. Louisa's arrival tomorrow will give us a respectable medical counterpoint. And what about this Theo? Vanessa's cousin lover? Oh, that's pure gold. Richard smiled for the first time that afternoon. I'm preparing a dossier on him. The bank transfers, the suspicious relationship, the possible conspiracy with the secretary. All of this raises serious questions about Vanessa's motives. If we can prove she has a financial interest in separating Sophia from you. Gustav nodded, beginning to see a path forward. We'll counterattack with everything. Exactly. But in the meantime, we need to ensure Sophia's safety. I'm concerned that Vanessa might try some desperate maneuver before the hearing. What do you mean? It wouldn't be the first time I've seen someone in her position try to create an emergency situation to force immediate judicial intervention. Perhaps an anonymous report of severe abuse or neglect, something that would justify removing the child from the home before the hearing. Gustav felt his blood run cold. Do you think she'd be capable of that? Based on what you've told me? Absolutely. Richard closed his briefcase with determination. I suggest you don't leave Sophia alone for a minute until Wednesday. And it would be prudent to install additional cameras in the house, covering all entrances. That night, after Sophia finally fell asleep, not without checking 3 times if the door was really locked, Gustav sat in the armchair beside his daughter's bed, watching over her sleep. The small figure under the blanket finally seemed at peace, clutching the plush rabbit that had been a gift from her biological mother. We'll get through this. Princess, he murmured, brushing a lock of hair from her sleeping face. I promise I'll never fail you again. As he watched Sophia sleep, his phone vibrated with a message. It was from the private investigator. Urgent information. Vanessa met with Theo and Dr. Albert this afternoon at a restaurant in Evergreen. I managed to get photos and partial recordings of the conversation. They repeatedly mentioned a plan B for Wednesday. I advise maximum caution. Gustav took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the imminent threat. He had less than 48 hours to prepare for whatever Vanessa was planning. And this time, he couldn't afford to underestimate her ability to manipulate people and situations. He looked at Sophia again, asleep in her innocence, and made a silent promise. No matter the cost, his daughter would never again feel fear or insecurity. Never again. Wednesday morning dawned shrouded in a dense fog that enveloped the Albright estate like a ghostly cloak. Gustav, who had barely slept the past few nights, watched the misty landscape from Sophia's bedroom window, where he had stood guard since receiving the alert about Vanessa's mysterious Plan B. The girl was still asleep, her gentle breathing the only sound in the quiet room. Beside her on the nightstand rested the necklace with the American robin pendant that Gustav had brought her from Seattle. She hadn't taken it off since. A light knock on the door announced Julia's arrival with a breakfast. Good morning, sir, she whispered, entering carefully so as not to wake Sophia. I brought coffee and some toast. Thank you, Julia, Gustav replied, rubbing his tired eyes. Any news outside? Mr. Richard is already in the living room with Dr. Louisa, and Mrs. Chloe arrived a few minutes ago. Gustav nodded. His small army of allies was gathered for the decisive confrontation that afternoon. I'll be down in a moment. Please stay with Sophia when she wakes up. Don't leave her alone for a second. Julia agreed with a solemn nod, understanding the gravity of the situation. In the living room, Richard spoke in a low voice with a woman in her 50s, with shoulder-length grey hair and piercing eyes behind red-rimmed glasses. Dr. Louisa Forbes, Sophia's former therapist. Chloe, the former housekeeper, sat a little apart, her robust hands nervously twisting a handkerchief. "Good morning, everyone," Gustav greeted, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "Gustav," Dr. Louisa stood up to hug him. "How is Sophia?" "Physically better. She's eating well, sleeping better. But emotionally," he hesitated, "the fear is constant. She checks the doors, doesn't want to be alone, draws Vanessa as a kind of lurking monster." The therapist nodded with understanding. "It's a natural response to trauma, but children have surprising resilience when they feel safe and loved." "We have news," Richard interrupted, adjusting his glasses. "Some good, others concerning." "Start with the good," Gustav requested, pouring himself a cup of the coffee Julia had brought. "The judge accepted our request to hear Dr. Louisa as an independent expert in today's hearing. And Child Protective Services agreed to send a different representative to follow the case, after we questioned the impartiality of the original social worker. And the worrying news." Richard exchanged a look with Dr. Louisa before answering. "Vanessa filed an emergency request claiming Sophia is in imminent psychological risk under your care. She presented new reports, including one from Dr. Oliver, the doctor who came here on Sunday. But his evaluation seemed neutral," Gustav protested. "Apparently he revised his conclusions after additional consultation with specialists," Richard explained, sarcasm evident in his voice. "Most alarming is that Judge Mason pre-authorized an immediate inpatient order, depending on the outcome of today's hearing." Gustav felt his blood run cold. "They can just take her like that?" Technically, yes. If the judge finds sufficient evidence of risk, he can order the child's temporary protection in a medical institution until a more complete evaluation is performed." "What about the dossier on Vanessa and Theo?" "The evidence of abuse?" "All ready to be presented," Richard assured him. "And we have a card up our sleeve. The investigator obtained compromising recordings of a conversation between Vanessa, Theo, and Dr. Albert. They are clearly conspiring to manipulate the judicial process." A heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by the distant sound of footsteps upstairs. Sophia had woken up. "I'll get the little one," Chloe announced, standing up. "Excuse me." When the former housekeeper left, Dr. Louisa approached Gustav, holding his hands firmly. "Gustav, there's something I need to ask you. In the last sessions I had with Sophia in New York City, before you moved to Aspen Ridge, she was starting to make significant progress. In a doll activity, she almost spoke. She even moved her lips as if trying to form words." "Yes, I remember," Gustav replied, recalling the hope he had felt at that time. "The pediatrician said it was a very positive sign." "Exactly. Sophia has no physical damage to her vocal cords. Her mutism is purely psychological, a response to trauma, and I firmly believe that in an environment of absolute safety, without Vanessa's presence, she could speak again." "Are you suggesting that this could happen?" "Soon?" The therapist smiled. "You never know with traumatized children. Sometimes when the source of fear is removed, recovery can be surprisingly quick." The sound of childish laughter interrupted the conversation, a sound so rare lately that everyone turned towards the stairs. Sophia was coming down hand in hand with Chloe, a genuine smile lighting up her little face. "Look who woke up in a good mood," Chloe exclaimed, affection evident in her voice. Sophia ran to her father, hugging him tightly before noticing Dr. Louisa's presence. Her eyes widened in recognition and joy. "Hello, Sophia," the therapist greeted, kneeling to be at the girl's height. "How I've missed you." To everyone's surprise, Sophia let go of her father and hugged the doctor spontaneously, a gesture of trust that brought tears to Gustav's eyes. "Have you had breakfast, Princess?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Julia made pancakes, your favorites." While Sophia ate in the kitchen under the care of Julia and Chloe, the adults continued planning the strategy for that afternoon's hearing. The atmosphere was one of tense anticipation, like soldiers preparing for a decisive battle. At 1 p.m., Gustav went upstairs to change, opting for a sober navy blue suit. He wanted to project the image of a responsible and balanced father, the exact opposite of the unstable and negligent man Vanessa would surely try to portray. As he came downstairs, He found Sophia waiting in the hall, dressed in a light blue dress that had been a gift from her maternal grandmother. The silver necklace with the American robin gleamed at her neck. "You look beautiful, Princess," Gustav praised, crouching to adjust a rebellious lock of hair. "Daddy has to go out for a few hours to talk to a judge, but Julia, Chloe, and Dr. Louisa will stay here with you. Is that okay?" Sophia nodded, though concern was visible in her large brown eyes. She picked up her drawing pad and opened it to a page where she had drawn what looked like a courtroom, with a figure representing Vanessa on one side and Gustav on the other. "Yes, it's something like that," he confirmed, impressed by his daughter's perception. "But don't worry. The truth is on our side." Sophia turned the page, revealing a new drawing, herself standing between Gustav and a female figure he recognized as his late wife, Cecilia. In the drawing, Sophia held both their hands and smiled. Below, written in childish letters, were the words, "True Family." Emotion hit Gustav like a wave, almost knocking him down. It was the second text Sophia had produced since the onset of her mutism. "Oh, Princess," he murmured, hugging her tightly. "This is beautiful. And it's true. The three of us will always be a family, no matter what happens." The Aspen Ridge Courthouse was an imposing building in the historic city center, with neoclassical columns and a marble staircase. As he ascended the steps, Gustav felt the weight of responsibility on his shoulders. Sophia's future would be decided in the next few hours. In the second-floor hallway, he found his lawyer animatedly talking with an older man, with a neatly trimmed white beard and a serious expression. "Gustav, this is Dr. Eugene Whitaker, a specialist in child and adolescent law," Richard introduced. "He agreed to assist us as a technical consultant." "Your daughter's case moved me," the specialist explained, shaking Gustav's hand. "And I have serious reservations about Judge Mason's conduct in similar cases." Before they could continue, the double doors at the end of the hallway opened, revealing Vanessa accompanied by a tall, slender man in an impeccable suit, presumably her lawyer. Behind them, Gustav recognized Dr. Raymond, Dr. Albert, and a third man who must have been Theo, Vanessa's cousin. The group approached, and for a tense moment, they stood face to face in the silent hallway. Vanessa was stunning, as always, perfectly styled hair, impeccable makeup, a discreet but elegant dress. Her eyes, however, revealed a cold glint of determination. "Gustav," she greeted with false cordiality, "I hope you came prepared to accept the reality of Sophia's condition. Specialized treatment truly is what's best for her." "The only reality I accept," he replied calmly, "is that you manipulated and abused my daughter for your own interests. And that ends today." Vanessa's smile wavered for an instant, but she quickly recomposed herself. "Always so dramatic. The doctors will explain everything to the judge. Sophia needs urgent professional help, not your conspiracy theories." Before Gustav could respond, the courtroom door opened, and a court officer announced the start of the session. The room was smaller than Gustav had imagined, with dark wood panels and an American flag beside the judge's chair. Unlike courtrooms shown in movies, there was no jury, just Judge Charles Edward Mason, a middle-aged man with a severe expression, seated in an elevated position. After the initial formalities and the introduction of the parties, Vanessa's lawyer opened the arguments with a detailed exposition of Sophia's supposed mental condition, supported by the reports of the three doctors. "Your Honor," he concluded in a grave voice, "we are facing a critical situation. The minor Sophia Albright shows clear signs of severe psychological disorder, exacerbated by paternal neglect and refusal of adequate treatment. We request an urgent protective measure in the form of temporary inpatient care for intensive evaluation at the Aspen Ridge Clinic, under the supervision of Dr. Albert Maxwell." The judge made some notes before turning to Richard. "The defense may present its arguments." Richard rose with studied calm. "Your Honor, what we have here is not a case of parental neglect or refusal of treatment. What we have is an orchestrated attempt by Mrs. Vanessa Montgomery Albright to alienate the minor Sophia from her father, using fraudulent diagnoses and manipulation of the judicial system." A murmur ran through the room, and the judge lightly tapped his gavel. "These are serious accusations, counsel. I hope you have substantial evidence." "We do, Your Honor, and we will begin by presenting the true specialist who worked with Sophia for almost 2 years before her move to Aspen Ridge, Dr. Louisa Forbes, a child psychologist specializing in trauma. Dr. Louisa introduced herself and presented her professional evaluation with clarity and authority, contradicting point by point the diagnoses presented by Vanessa's doctors. Then it was Chloe's turn, who detailed the abuses she had witnessed, her voice choked with emotion at several points. The judge listened to everything with a neutral expression, making occasional notes. When Julia finished her testimony, the third in Gustav's series of witnesses, he seemed thoughtful, but still not convinced. The allegations are disturbing, the magistrate admitted, but we have a clear conflict here between testimonies and medical reports. The child's well-being must prevail over any other consideration. Vanessa's lawyer seized the opportunity. Exactly, Your Honor. And that is why temporary inpatient care is the most prudent measure. It will allow for an impartial evaluation in a controlled environment, free from influences from both parties. That's when Richard played his decisive card. Your Honor, before any decision, I would like to present evidence of a possible conspiracy to manipulate this judicial process. The judge frowned. Proceed. Richard signaled to an assistant who entered carrying a laptop and audio equipment. This is a recording legally obtained in a public place, the Portofino restaurant in Evergreen 2 days ago. In it, we will hear Mrs. Vanessa Montgomery Albright conversing with her cousin and alleged lover, Theo Montgomery, and with Dr. Albert Maxwell. Vanessa visibly paled, exchanging alarmed glances with her lawyer. Theo, sitting in the front row of the audience, stood abruptly, but was restrained by a stern look from the judge. The recording was played with enough clarity for everyone to hear. Vanessa's voice was unmistakable. It doesn't matter what that idiot presents as evidence. With 3 medical reports confirming the need for inpatient care, Judge Mason will have no choice. He always favors medical interventions in these cases. What if Albright manages to reverse the situation? Asked the male voice that must have been Theo's. Impossible. Once Sophia is in the clinic, the doctor here will ensure she stays long enough. Won't you, Albert? The clinic's protocols are quite flexible, a third voice replied, especially for complex cases requiring prolonged observation. And when we finally get custody, Vanessa continued, the next step will be the revision of the will. As the wife and legal guardian of the heiress, I will have total control over the assets until her majority. And believe me, much can happen until then. A sepulchral silence fell over the room when the recording ended. Judge Mason seemed astonished, his expression oscillating between disbelief and contained fury. Your Honor, Richard seized the moment. In addition to this recording, we have banking evidence of regular transfers from Mrs. Vanessa to Mr. Theo Montgomery over the past 8 months, totaling over $300,000. We also have proof that Mr. Albright's secretary was strategically placed by Vanessa to intercept important communications, including warning calls about Sophia's treatment. Vanessa's lawyer stood up, visibly shaken. Your Honor, I question the legality of this recording. It is a clear violation of privacy and— The recording was made in a public place, Richard interrupted. There is no expectation of privacy in a restaurant. Furthermore, the content clearly indicates a conspiracy to defraud the judicial process, which makes the evidence admissible, even if there were some irregularity in its obtainment. Judge Mason took a deep breath, adjusting his glasses with a gesture that conveyed his perturbation. I will take a 30-minute recess to analyze this new evidence. The session is temporarily suspended. During the recess, Gustav remained in the courtroom, unable to face Vanessa in the hallway. He felt emotionally drained, but also hopeful for the first time in days. That was a decisive blow, Richard commented, sitting beside him. The judge's expression when he heard that recording, he felt personally insulted by the way Vanessa spoke of him. Do you think it's enough to prevent immediate inpatient care? Almost certainly. To secure your sole custody and a favorable divorce. Most likely, for possible criminal charges against Vanessa. Perhaps. When the session resumed, Judge Mason seemed to have aged 10 years. His expression was grave when he began to speak. This case, he declared, has taken a dramatic turn with the newly presented evidence. The recording and documents strongly suggest an attempt to manipulate not only this process but also this court. He paused, looking directly at Vanessa, who held her chin high in silent defiance. Considering all the evidence, testimonies and documents presented, I rule the following. The provisional custody of the minor Sophia Albright remains entirely with her father, Gustav Albright. Mrs. Vanessa Montgomery Albright is prohibited from approaching the child or the family residence within 200 yards until the conclusion of the divorce proceedings and definition of permanent custody. A collective sigh swept through the room. Gustav closed his eyes briefly, feeling an immense weight leave his shoulders. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am forwarding copies of this entire proceeding to the district attorney's office for investigation of possible crimes of child abuse, falsification of documents, and attempted judicial fraud. And I will notify the state medical board regarding the questionable ethical conduct of the doctors involved. Vanessa's lawyer rose to protest, but the judge cut him off with an imperious gesture. The decision has been made. If a party disagrees, they may appeal through appropriate channels. Vanessa stood abruptly, her face a mask of contained fury. For a moment, she seemed about to say something, but then turned on her heel and left the room, followed by her lawyer and Theo, who cast a venomous glance at Gustav. Dr. Albert and Dr. Raymond remained seated, suddenly looking small and uncomfortable under the judge's stern gaze. Gentlemen, the magistrate addressed them. I suggest you prepare consistent defenses for the ethical inquiry you will face. This court does not look favorably upon professionals who apparently lend themselves to manipulating diagnoses for interests unrelated to a child's well-being. Both doctors nodded in silence, avoiding eye contact with anyone in the room. After the final formalities and the signing of the necessary documents, Gustav could finally breathe a sigh of relief. The legal battle was won, for now at least. Congratulations, Richard said, shaking his hand firmly. It was an important victory, but don't be fooled. Vanessa is dangerous and she's wounded. Stay vigilant in the coming weeks. I won't let my guard down until everything is completely resolved, Gustav assured him. Now I need to go back to Sophia. She must be anxious. The drive back to the mansion had never seemed so long. With each curve of the winding road, Gustav imagined Sophia's face receiving the good news. Finally, they could begin to rebuild their lives without Vanessa's threatening shadow hanging over them. Upon arriving, he found the house strangely silent. There was no sign of Julia or Chloe on the ground floor. Hello? He called, feeling a pang of apprehension. Sophia? Dr. Louisa. The sound of hurried footsteps came from the stairs, and Julia appeared, her face illuminated by a nervous smile. Mr. Albright, thank goodness you're here. Something happened. Before Gustav could panic, she quickly added, something wonderful, but you'd better see it with your own eyes. We're in Sophia's room. Intrigued, Gustav climbed the stairs behind Julia. In Sophia's room, he found Chloe and Dr. Louisa sitting on the edge of the bed, both with expressions of astonishment and emotion. Sophia was between them, holding her plush rabbit, her little face radiant with something Gustav hadn't seen in years, a pure joy without shadows of fear. Princess, he called, approaching. Daddy's back. And I brought great news. Sophia stood up, her eyes shining with anticipation. The judge decided that you will stay with me, Gustav explained, kneeling to be at his daughter's height. Vanessa will no longer be able to approach you. You will never have to be afraid of her again. The girl broke into a luminous smile, and then, to Gustav's complete astonishment, she opened her mouth and pronounced in a soft voice, slightly hoarse from disuse, I love you, Daddy. The world seemed to freeze. Gustav was paralyzed, unable to believe what he had just heard. These were the first words Sophia had spoken in 3 years. My God, he whispered, tears streaming freely down his face. Sophia, you spoke. The girl nodded, still smiling, though she was also crying now. I don't need to be scared anymore, she said slowly, each word clearly an effort but also a victory. Gustav hugged her tightly, unable to suppress his sobs. Over his daughter's shoulder, he saw Dr. Louisa wiping her own eyes. It was extraordinary, the therapist explained when Gustav finally managed to compose himself. We were here waiting for news from the hearing, when Sophia suddenly asked for paper and pencils. She wrote, I want to speak when Daddy comes back. We started some simple exercises, and little by little she began forming words. It's a miracle, Chloe murmured, openly weeping. It's not a miracle, Dr. Louisa gently corrected. It's the result of removing the primary source of ongoing trauma, Vanessa, combined with the security Sophia feels with her father. Psychogenic mutism can, in some cases, be overcome quickly when the right circumstances align. Sophia tugged at her father's sleeve, drawing his attention. I can speak slowly, she explained, each word carefully formed. Dr. Louisa said it. We'll get better. It certainly will get better, Gustav assured, kissing his daughter's forehead. And no matter how slowly you speak, your voice is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. In the days that followed, the Albright estate transformed. The shadows that seemed to inhabit every corner began to dissipate under the sound of Sophia's voice, which gained strength and confidence each day. Dr. Louisa visited regularly, conducting therapy sessions that now included speech exercises. Vanessa, as promised, did not give up easily. There was an attempt at judicial appeal, quickly overturned based on the evidence presented. Then, an effort to tarnish Gustav's reputation in the local press, which failed when the newspaper, investigating the story, discovered even darker details about her actions. Finally, 2 weeks after the hearing, Richard brought the news that Vanessa had accepted the terms of the divorce, relinquishing any claim to the property or assets, in exchange for the dismissal of the most serious criminal charges. She would leave Aspen Ridge and, according to investigator reports, planned to move to France. Is it really over? Gustav asked, almost unable to believe it. Legally, yes, Richard replied. She no longer poses a threat to you. But the emotional impact, that will take time to fully heal. On a sunny winter afternoon, almost a month after the trial, Gustav and Sophia sat in the garden, near the Victorian greenhouse that had once been a stage for conspiracies and now served as a place for joyful encounters. Chloe, who had agreed to return as housekeeper, served fresh lemonade while Julia arranged a picnic basket. Daddy, Sophia called, her voice now almost normalized, though she still hesitated occasionally on more complex words. Can I show you something? Of course, Princess. Sophia took a small folded drawing from her pocket. On it there was a portrait of her new family configuration: Gustav, Sophia, Chloe, Julia, and even Dr. Louisa. Everyone was smiling under a bright sun, and above, like a guardian angel, was a representation of Cecilia, Sophia's biological mother, observing the scene with approval. It's for the living room mural, Sophia explained, to remind us that we are a true family now. Gustav hugged his daughter, his heart overflowing with emotion. It's perfect, Sophia. Absolutely perfect. That night, after putting Sophia to bed, a ritual that now included stories told by both, with the girl happily practicing her recovered speech, Gustav lingered for a few moments, watching her sleep. The American robin pendant shone softly in the lamplight, a symbol of recovered freedom. In the hallway, he stopped before Cecilia's portrait, which had now returned to its prominent place in the house. She's well, he whispered to the image of his late wife. I promise she always will be. As he went down to his study, Gustav found an envelope on his desk that hadn't been there before. Inside there was a card written in Sophia's childish yet determined hand. Thank you for saving me, Daddy. Now we can be happy again. I love you more than anything, Sophia. And beneath the message, a small drawing, an American robin in full flight, free and fearless, singing its melody to the world. Gustav held the card to his chest, feeling that finally the nightmare had truly ended. The future stretched ahead, full of possibilities, of words to be spoken, of smiles to be shared, of a family reborn from the ashes of fear. Sophia was safe, and her voice, silenced for so long, now echoed through the mansion like the most beautiful of melodies, bringing back the light that had long faded from that place.